Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our 12th webinar. Tonight we're having an introduction to truffles. Fungus Day is on October the 5th in the UK, and we wanted to mark the occasion. So some months ago, we put out an advert for some fungi and fungals to get in touch if they wanted to do a talk. We have many kind offers, but James's email stood out because firstly, it had the most mushroom puns. And also, I thought you'd all enjoy something a little bit different regarding the truffles. James, so please, without further ado, I will hand over to James and you can tell us all about English truffles.
Great, thank you. So, good evening. Thank you for Sarah for letting me. I didn't realise it was a competition. The most fungy puns was the one that got picked, but there were a few in there, including the obvious ones. So, yeah, truffles, something different. Let me swap so I can see the screen I need and get a pointer. Yeah, it's rather an unusual occupation to tell people you're work full-time with truffles, and there are two obvious questions that inevitably get asked, and so it saves me a lot of time to get them printed onto a t-shirt. So that's my threat. So answer to question one is yes, truffles can be found in England. Most people think they've got to go off to Spain or Italy or France or somewhere to find truffles, but they are in this country. And the second question, I'm sure somebody has guessed. No, we don't use a pig. It's all done with dogs these days for a lot of reasons, as I'll mention later. We don't use pigs. So how did I get into this mad game? I've been eating wild mushrooms, for instance, fungi, and all sorts of natural history for a long, long time. Post redundancy from somewhere, I wanted something to occupy my time, and as well as looking for jobs. And the local newspaper was talking about truffle dishes that they were serving up with very local truffles. I had a dog, I had the interest, so went online and found this lady who used to run a truffle training school, and went to her with my trusty Labrador, had a couple of hours with her. She invited us to participate in the UK's first truffle hunting championships, and cut a long story short, we won it. And so we were the reigning truffle hunting champions from 2008, so a long, long time ago, my first involvement in truffles, and they only restarted doing it in the last couple of years, so we reigned for a long, long time. So yeah, I started finding them and started to supply various places, storeholder at Borough Market, a truffle tree company, and I'll talk about that later on. So as well as doing a full-time job, I set up the business. I was on a fixed-term contract in gainful employment and wanted something to keep me in the area afterwards. So I set up businesses, and one was all to do with truffles. So 2011 we formed. 2012 I think I went half-time, in employment and doing my own thing, and then 2014 full-time. So it's 10 years anniversary of full-time in truffles now. So among the accolades, things our truffles have done, that's the menu for the BAFTAs 2020. It includes Dorset truffle creamed parsnip. So just before lockdown, sure it's nothing to do with me, people were eating my truffles at the BAFTAs. That's a dish, the Young National Chef of the Year final. I didn't attend it, but one of our chef customers did, and sadly didn't win, but got highly placed, and that's his dish featuring the truffles. We supply a number of different food manufacturers, from little artisans producing, the beekeepers, they produce honeys, but include a truffle honey in their range. These English truffle crisps, you can get those in Selfridges at Twickenham, in the Dorchester Hotel, all of Heston Blumenthal's outlets, and so on. So quite upmarket places. All over the media, like a rash, from the food programme, Gardener's Question Time, to whatever, Hello Magazine, Country Life, all sorts of places. A YouTube video by an American business magazine featuring me. I think this caption, Beck is actually the truffle hunter and I'm his assistant, is the real way around. That's been viewed an amazing 17.5 million times. Now, really weird reading comments about yourself, and from Americans thinking that truffles are made of chocolate or something. So I'm going to cover fairly quickly the items there. So what's the truffle? How do they grow? Kind of bit on history, species. Have you got truffles? Because my hope is some of you small woodland owners might have got truffles that you're unaware of. Bit on finding them, cultivating truffles, and finish with talking about possible opportunities for collaborations. So it's a kind of fungus. And Ben, hello Ben, um, gave you his talk on fungi. Primarily, he was talking about sort of ones above the ground. So they reproduce by dropping spores, the fungal world's equivalent of seeds. But your truffle being under the ground can't do that. So the reason they smell is to attract a passing animal, a badger, a squirrel, a deer, a vole, to dig them up, eat them, and then spread them. Hopefully, it goes to a far distant corner of the wood. Even better, it goes to some completely new wood and dungs there and spreads the spores. So that's how truffles move about, carried by animals. Those are silly prices, charity auctions. So don't worry, I don't get paid £113,000 for finding a 1 kilo truffle. And those for Italian white truffles, which are the most valuable of all sorts of truffles. So a lot of money can be involved in them. And they're called diamonds, the kitchen, or black gold as well because of their value. And half of people don't like the smell or the flavour. Interestingly, my other half can't stand the smell of them. So was always complaining when she's getting into my car the day after I've been truffle hunting, or she goes near my truffle fridge. Yes, I have a separate truffle fridge because she doesn't want the smell anywhere near her food. A bit on biology, as Ben was telling you, the mushroom, the bit that you see above ground, is the fruiting body. It's just a small part of the organism. The much larger part is the mycelium, microscopic threads in the ground for many fungi or in rotting wood for some. And that's there all year round. And at certain points of the year, depending on the type of fungus, when the weather conditions meet what it likes, it thinks I should reproduce, so it creates its fruiting bodies. So you suddenly walk out into your grassy field on your dog walk and you might spot some field mushrooms, and they're just the fruiting bodies. Remarkably, if you put a teaspoon into the floor of a woodland, this mycelium and the hyphae is a related term, I get 100 meters on a teaspoon. And I do pick and eat fungi. Some people are less keen on picking them. I know what I'm doing. But scientific studies have shown that picking doesn't sort of have detrimental effects on future populations. Adjacent plots, in one they've picked everything, in the other they've not picked anything. And 25 years later, there's still no difference sort of in the volume that appears. It's like picking blackberries off a bush or apples off a tree. You're just picking the fruit. The main part of the organism is still there. And again, as Ben told you, you won't get too many more plugs. Certain fungi are near certain trees. So if I'm out looking at fungi, if you're going on a fungus foray, part of the assistance to identifying what it is, what the fungi is to knowing what tree it's with, because there's relationships between trees and fungi. And what's happening is a mycorrhizal relationship I'll show in a moment. The fungus is on the roots, and so it's actually increasing the area that the fungus can get nutrients and waters from. This mycorrhizal relationship is an example of symbiosis. There's something in it for both sides, both for fungi and plant. The fungus is getting water and nutrients and then getting carbohydrates backwards from plant. So it's something good for both the partners. Mycorrhizal means fungus root in Greek. And lots of plants would have these given the opportunity. I mean, not just sort of the trees that you'd see in a woodland, but many other things. For example, if you were to grow an orchid, you might actually get a sachet of mycorrhizal fungi to sprinkle onto the roots when you put it into the compost in the pot to help it be nice and healthy in the future. Again, untruffle related, a lot of the Caledonian pine forest restoration up in Scotland, they actually dig the hole, put in a little bit of mycorrhizal fungi, before then putting the young tree in and sort of pushing the hole closed. And again, it's to help the tree be healthy. The truffle life cycle, we are at this point of the year now for the type of species that I look for. So they're hopefully nice and ripe and aromatic, and that aroma is attracting a variety of passing animals, a bit of vole, a bit of squirrel. They're eating truffle, which is primarily spores, as I say, going to the far corner of the wood or even a different bit of woodland, some new planting, and will and hopefully the rainfall will wash the spores through the cracks into the soil. They'll come into contact with the roots and they'll do the equivalent of germinating. They'll sort of develop through a couple of stages. And a number of years later, could be 5, 10 for truffles, the mycelium is mature enough to create fruiting bodies and hopefully they will ripen. So they're actually annual. They don't build up year on year and get bigger. Like grapes that you would harvest once, you go in, pick every grape on a single day. We'll get new fungi, new truffles coming right every couple of weeks. So I go into the same wood on a sort of 3 or 4 week rotation, so I can sort of gather the truffles from them. So we've actually got quite a long history of knowing about truffles in this country. One of the earliest published comments was in 1693 by a learned scientist of the day, appeared in a learned journal, the Royal Society's Philosophical Transactions, and he wrote about the truffles found at Rushton in Northamptonshire. It's sort of a stately home, a large house, and that was sort of one of the first places which truffles were noted. A Botany professor at Cambridge wrote in 1728, "I've taken pains to search for them in England and have found them in many places, in woods, especially in Surrey, Middlesex, Kent, Essex, in Hertfordshire and Northamptonshire. And I guess we have very few old woods without them." Sorry, Professor, you weren't quite right. Transport wasn't great. His searches were limited to areas within a radius of Cambridge, and yes, he found truffles in many places, but those woods weren't necessarily representative of all woods across the country. So they're not in all woods. They do require certain conditions for them to occur. 150 years later, they were aware of what the commonality was. In this country, it may be found on almost every chalky down, especially where plantations of beech flourish, and in many gentlemen's parks and on lawns. Hampshire, Wiltshire, Dorset, and Kent, all these counties use truffles of rich quality and in great abundance. So the commonality they had worked out was chalk and also limestone. So it requires the right sort of soil, lime-rich, alkaline, free-draining soil. And they were especially found where plantations of beech flourish. And yes, beech is their favourite tree, found with other deciduous trees as well, but particularly so with beech. In many gentlemen's parks, with apologies to the ladies listening in, back then it was the gentleman, the lord of the manor, etc. And it was the era of Capability Brown and lots of sort of landscape parks, planting like you might see at many sort of stately homes, National Trust properties that you visited. This sort of naturalistic planting, making them look like the countryside, so sort of the lakes, you'll know, but bits of wood and spinneys, copses, etc. So lots of trees were being put in, soil moved around, and if you're planting trees, then as long as you've got the truffles within a distance that could be bought by the animals wandering about, then they got spread. So stately homes, many of them were found. And on lawns, yes, you need a tree, but you don't need a whole woodland. So just one tree on a grassy area could technically have truffles on underneath it. The counties mentioned there, Hampshire, Wiltshire, Dorset and Kent. I would add Sussex into that list. And at the time, they were producing truffles of rich quality and great abundance. The world's moved on a little bit. Yeah, there are invasive species, ash and sycamore getting into, gone to many woods. So I've been to some of these places where truffles were known 150 years ago and not found anything there today, but still about. So we actually had a small but thriving truffle business back in 18th to the early 20th century. And the focus of that was the beech woodlands, as mentioned in the previous quote, in southern England. Truffle hunting was a sport. If you were lord and lady, whoever, instead of shooting this, chasing that, you also went truffle hunting. a chap with the dogs who knew what he was doing was brought in, and you enjoyed a day of truffle hunting. The capital of the truffle hunting world at that time was a little village called Winterslow, which is just outside of Salisbury. And from census records, we actually had 13 people who listed truffle hunting as their part of their occupation. So woodsman and truffle hunter, or farm labourer and truffle hunter. The head man was this chap, Eli Collins. He's wearing a velvet coat that was seen as a sign of opulence, and that was a gift from one particular lord. He's probably got a gold watch on a chain. Unusually, he's having his photograph taken. Not many agricultural labourers at the time would have their photograph taken. And you can see his truffle digging tool, the staff. You can see his hounds as well, some sort of poodly mongrel types. And he knew all the gentry. So this sport I mentioned, he took people, or people on his behalf went out across the sort of big estates in the chalky areas, covering a huge area. And even at that time, getting over to the Isle of Wight and sort of much of southern England where the conditions were right. Passed the reins on to his son, Alfred. Alfred had a bicycle and he had two poodles. And so when he went out on his truffle hunts, the two poodles rode in the panniers. Hopefully the panniers would be full on the way home. So the poor dogs, having done their day's work, had to run along behind him. One of his dogs liked to eat truffles, not good for business. When I was out with the Radio 4 food programme describing the truffle unearthing process, I looked behind producer, presenter Dan Saladino, and the blinking dog was eating a truffle, but I managed to reprimand him in a suitable manner for a daytime audience on BBC Radio. On a good day, Alfred could get 25 pounds or over 11 kilos of truffle, actually stunning, stunning weight. I've never got anything like 11 kilos in a day. If I've got 1 kilo from one wood for a few hours, I'm very happy with that. Alfred gave up in the 1930s the rheumatism of kneeling on wet ground. I've got that to look forward to. Meant he retired with ill health, and according to many of the books and articles, he was the last professional truffle hunter. But times have changed. Around the millennium, started to remember we had truffles in this country. When we first started to talk about sustainable, local, organic farmers markets came back into or came into existence, then people started to go back to some of these places and look for truffles. History interests you. In lockdown version 1, I wrote the definitive history of English truffles, and so it's on the website, and the website address is there. So species, in is a recorder of fungi. This is not less interested in the eating. Rule number 1, if you are a forager, is you only eat something if you're 100% certain that you know what it is and it's safe to do so. So there actually are quite a lot of things that are truffle-like, so fungi that are under the ground, but not all of them are what we call true truffles. So many of them, some people call false truffles. And of those that are the true truffles around the world, only about a dozen are eaten. We describe a truffle as black or white, but that is akin to saying deciduous or a coniferous tree. There are many species of black, there are many species of white, and not all are equal. Those are the most famous two, the Perigord black and the Italian white, the most famous and the most expensive. When I first started taking people out truffle hunting in 2011, I'd say, oh, we'll never see them in this country, but I eat my words. I'm aware of about half a dozen people that have cultivated the Perigord black, the most valuable black truffle. And I actually went to a truffle orchard, nothing to do with apple trees, but that's what we call it, where truffles are cultivated in January last year. And I found my first Perigord. So I was shocked and delighted. So in Britain, we used to think there were two main species of interest. There are about 13 tubers, the true truffles, but only two that we really care about. But the scientific world, like many things, species of flowers and so on, we thought were different families. DNA testing sort of rewrites the rule book. So what were two, the scientists say there are one. So we might call them the summer or autumn truffle if you're a scientist. The culinary world does say that is a summer truffle. and that is a different beastie. That is an autumn truffle, and they are different, but they now sort of take on what were the former two Latin names. They're cousins to the Perigords, they're black truffles, but they're not quite as good. Um, they are not some sort of inferior British species. They're very much a European species found from the Balkans, so from Ireland in the west to the Balkans in the east, and from southern Sweden down as far as Cyprus, including all parts of the UK where conditions are right. And so, while Perigords, melanosporum are the most sold, very similar quantities of the ones that we're looking for are found, and they're very prized as well. We go into lots of truffle orchards as well. Got a lot on species on the website. So very briefly, that's a summer truffle. So black, irregular, polygonal warts, a little like small barnacles on the outside. And when they're nice and ripe, the latter part of the summer, a sort of milky chocolate with this beautiful veins or marbling within the main body. When they're unripe, they're the sort of color of my sort of slide background. So we get a lot of reports from people finding in their gardens, 3 or 4 a week at times. So in the first lockdown, people were sort of doing garden makeover, pulling up all the ivy on the rockery. And I got lots and lots of people saying, I found these, are they truffles? And well done, but sadly you can't ripen an unripe truffle. Once it's out, it's only going to deteriorate. So time to set up into little pieces and scattered around the garden with the hope they might do what the animals do. They're hinting at an autumn truffle, but not as good as an autumn truffle. The season, I wouldn't buy them in April, May by a long way. I'd sort of wait to the latter part of the summer. And price sounds a lot, but sort of a table tennis ball, 30 grams, you'd probably pay about £18. Where you buy, you pay a different price. And if it, you know it was flown in yesterday from whoever, then you pay a higher price. You know, on eBay, goodness knows how old it is or where it's come from, probably Eastern Europe, I guess. So my main focus looking for truffles is one called the autumn truffle. As mentioned, Culinary World makes the differentiation more commonly in the literature called Burgundy truffles. That's what the rest of the world calls them. Occasionally called the English truffle, hence my company name, the English Truffle Company. So a darker flesh inside, a sort of more nutty brown. Externally identical to the summer truffle, but yeah, as I say, darker, and they've got a much more stronger, powerful aroma. My car was still smelling quite nice and strongly the day after I truffle hunted this week on Tuesday. When I went somewhere yesterday, I could still smell truffles very much in the car. They're the most widely eaten across Europe, and the period is autumn plus. As soon as it becomes autumn, I call it an autumn truffle. They're a progression of the same thing, but in a better form is the autumn truffle. And some years I've gone on as long as Valentine's Day, but probably by sort of middle of January, I've lost the will to live and gone to another truffle for 6 months. And price is higher. My entry point, that sort of table tennis ball, 30 grams, will cost you £28.50, so 950 a kilo. And that's selling to individuals, sort of via mail order, via the website. Trade prices, restaurants and things are quite a lot less. So, coming more close to home, have you got truffles in your small woodland? On this map, we've got chalk in green and limestones in brown. And those are the primary areas where we find our truffles, where we're getting these alkaline, free draining, lime-rich soils. So I popped some old county boundaries on. I'm talking to you down in Dorset, so we've got quite a lot of chalk, including the bit that runs across the Purbeck, and then the Beadles, and then the backbone of the Isle of Wight. It goes into Wiltshire, so lots of Wiltshire and southern and northeastern have chalk underneath them. A large part of Hampshire is under chalk, including the South Downs. Exton going past into Sussex, past Brighton Hove, and heading for Beachy Head down here. Chalk starts again the North Downs, the White Cliffs of Dover, comes up to the North Downs, then passes south of London as the Surrey Hills. It's gone through bits of Berkshire, the Berkshire Downs, Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire, Hertfordshire, Cambridgeshire, the sort of Cambridge Wolds and so on, bits of East Anglian counties, but primarily it's masked by glacial deposits there. And we've got a bit more of the Lincolnshire wolds and the Yorkshire wolds. Limestone, plenty of that up in Yorkshire's and uh, Cumbria, and a few bits coming down. This becomes the Cotswold Hills eventually. Great place to go truffling. I've got clients there. Comes down through sort of bits of Hampshire into Somerset, sort of the Mendip Hills, and comes back down into Dorset a little bit. We've got little bits under Wales as well, both sort of north and south, but not a great deal. So those are the main areas where you're going to be getting truffles. If you're in outlying areas, then it's a lot less likely, but not impossible. I get strange locations like out in north of near to the Welsh Herefordshire border. People find truffles in their garden. We move soils about, we move trees about. It's a pH preference that they've got, most commonly found in the Falkland limestone areas. Those stars are published truffle finds. Published, they've told Kew Gardens about it, and it's into the sort of the national database of fungal records. It's a huge underrepresentation. I found truffles in at least 90 different places. And do I put into the public domain the grid references of where I found my truffles? No, I don't. And newspaper searches can add lots more onto that map. These people that get in touch with me, they found their gardens, can add a lot more spots onto the map. Newspaper headlines are written about truffle finds. I find that very strange. Down in Brixton and in Plymouth, roughly the headlines were along the lines of gardener finds truffles digging roses, shock. A local chef said he'd never heard of truffles being found in Britain before. I think that chef wants to get out a bit more. Many of the top Michelin-starred restaurants have sort of British truffles on their menus. I can get 3 or 4 people a week telling me they found truffles, so it's not an uncommon thing to me. So I mentioned the pH. The optimum is what we get on the chalk and limestone, but you do occasionally get them sort of outside the optimum. That sort of does explain some of these ones, like on the Herefordshire border that I mentioned. So as a small woodland owner, if you're in those areas, then tick 1 in the box. You may have truffles. So tree species, I mentioned earlier on that beech is the favourite of the truffle trees, and in the published data, when I looked at it, of the species that were given, each had the biggest slice of the pie. Sadly not recorded or in the soil in many cases, but with oak, birch, hazel, holly, hornbeam, other and conifers. People that sell trees to help you try and grow truffles, I'll tell you that about that later on. Primarily it's deciduous, oak and hazel and so on. Some people will sell a fir tree that's been inoculated. I've never found a truffle I could conclusively say was on a conifer. Maybe you've got a mix of trees in a woodland, and between a beech and a conifer, so you just, oh, this is on the conifer, it's a bit nearer to the conifer. Without DNA testing, you wouldn't know. So that picture shows a classic beech woodland on chalk. It's plantation, they're in lines. It was put in on this particular site in Wiltshire about 40 years ago by the current farmer's father. And truffles were not part of the plan. It's just good luck that they have truffles in there. It must have been in some woodland, almost acted as a donor site, and the animals then went in there, scurrying about looking for worms, dunged, and now there are truffles in that woodland. So beech is best, but some of the places that I go to could be oak standards over a hazel coppice, hazel understory. They might be mixed deciduous, where you've got all manner of things, perhaps a few beech, but plenty of hazel, some oak, some lime, possibly some cherry, all sorts of are in those mixed woodlands. So they don't all have to look like that, but it's my favourite. If I'm driving around and I see beech on chalk, very distinctive from a distance, then my little radar starts to get excited that there could be truffles in that location. So if you've got beech plantation on chalk or limestone, great. If you've got mixed deciduous woodlands on chalk or limestone, great. Um, like Ben probably may have said, so I said I wasn't going to mention him again. No, um, ash and sycamore are not good for truffles and fungi in general. There's only one that sort of likes to grow actually on the ash, the King Alfred's cake, but very little grows if you've got a lot of ash or sycamore. So pigs, my question two was no, I don't use a pig, but pigs were used like this French peasant here. Um, the piggy has a chain around its neck and the peasant is watching incredibly closely because if piggy finds truffle, piggy will want to eat truffle and piggy has very sharp teeth. So there were many truffle hunters that were missing a few digits where they try to rescue the truffle out of the piggy's mouth. Um, but pigs are history for practical and ecological reasons. It was the sow that was used because one of the gases that comes off a truffle is very similar to a pheromone in the saliva of the boar. So Mrs. Piggy would be wandering around and thinking, "Oh, I can smell a rather handsome boar somewhere," and had something else on her mind. They know how to dig, and back in the day, many people had a pig out the back, throwing at their scraps for generating bacon later on in the year. But you legally, in some countries, pigs are banned from finding truffles. We don't have laws such in this country. So the only time they're really used is if there's a camera around. Would you have a pig on the back seat of your car? If you walked into a woodland with a pig, everybody would know what you're doing. Whereas if you're just somebody walking the dog, you're somebody walking the dog, and you just blend into the background. Anonymity is good. So dogs have got remarkable noses, and a lot of their brain is dedicated to processing the signals. Any of you've got dogs, you know how much they love to sniff, and we can harness this talent they have to find all manner of things. They were used in some countries for COVID testing, far higher accuracy than those horrible things we had to stick up our noses, and instant. So you could go through an airport in Finland fairly early on in COVID, and the Labrador would say, "Yes, you may get on the plane. Yes, you may. No, you're not going on because you've got COVID." And somebody I met once was sent a paper suit when they had COVID, put it on for a day or two, and then it went off for dog training. And they showed me a link to the scientific paper, and they were about 94% accurate, so better than the tests. But all manner of things from the obvious things, explosive, but blood. I know somebody who, as a living, finds lost cats. Give his dog some of the bedding, and then it goes off and tracks down the cat, shut in somebody's garage or something. Dogs, a retriever was obviously for retrieving game. This Italian poodle-looking thing, Ligottos, sort of poodle terrier cross sort. They're the ones in their breed history. They were the truffle hunters. Lots and lots of people have Ligottos in this country, and most of them think their dogs should be truffle hunting. I ran a workshop for dog training at the weekend on Sunday, and 2 of the 8 dogs were Ligottos. But there were all manner of other things as well, including a collie that was very good as well. Lots of good dogs, some good spaniels, all sorts. So to me, it's not breed that's the key thing. It's the dog's attitude, their desire to please you. And I'm a Labrador man, so food helps. If you have a Labrador, stomach on legs, you persuade them to do almost anything given food. So that's some of my rogues galleries. He pauses to remember the late great Bramble, the late great Max, and that's a current one. So I think I'm on numbers 4 and 5. That's one of our current beasties, the lab on the right. He was out truffle hunting with guests on Saturday. My youngster was out with me on Tuesday for sales. So cultivating truffles, the original efforts in this direction were quite a long time ago, 18th century in France. A woodland that had truffles, a farmer planted some acorns in the ground near to it with the hope the animals would spread them, and he was successful and got some truffles into his new trees. But in the 1970s, it became a lot more scientific, and trees went through the process that we call inoculation. So among techniques, one is you grow a small sapling, and when it's fairly, perhaps 8 inches high or so, you remove all the soil from it and you replant it into a mixture that includes truffle spores, so ground up truffles and some other things. Or you might make a truffle soup in inverted commas, and you dip the young sapling into that and then plant it up into a suitable growing medium. And you put them in polytunnels, perhaps for a year, so they don't get fungal spores that are blowing around in the air, contaminating them, and then they're planted out. So today, something like 80 or 90% of truffles are cultivated, including in this country. All components of this country have got truffle orchards. We have no idea of the areas. There's different companies in it. It's not an agricultural statistic yet. Like the area of vineyards is known, the vine, the tonnage for grapes is known. It's not guaranteed to succeed, so you could end up with very expensive firewood. But a lot of landowners are looking at it as an alternative to classic farming. So in theory, it could be the most profitable use per unit area you could make in diversification terms. It's more profitable than having a vineyard, but the risk is higher. You may not get anything. And I mentioned the inoculation process. Classically, the truffle orchard is going out into fields, so maybe grassland or arable land. So you're not putting them into a woodland because there are contaminating fungi. Well, that's the view of the classic view, that we don't put them into woodlands. Things are possibly starting to change a little bit. The role of competing fungi is not as bad as we thought. They might actually help. So I've known 2 years from when the trees go in the ground to when truffles appears. I've known 14 years. It varies from site to site, partly how much management is done. Some people just plant and forget and then hope for the best. You saw on the map where the chalk and limestone are, but you could actually cultivate anywhere from a soil pH perspective. A standard agricultural operation is to spread and work into the ground agricultural limestone, crushed and burnt limestone, and that raises the soil pH into the region of their preference. So our first one in the UK was in Leicestershire on old red sandstone, former arable field. But as I say, all component parts of the UK and Ireland have had successful truffle cultivations now. There are companies that will hold your hand the entire way, advise on soil testing, planting designs, etc. They'll actually sell every truffle that you get, but they want to take a cut. You can just buy the trees, and I, among other outlets, sell truffle trees via the website. Great Christmas wedding presents, etc. Small advert. Daily Mail, bless it. Essentially, they're saying through that headline, after 3 years, Prince Philip didn't get any truffle trees, despite spending a lot of money and having 2 dogs there. 3 years. One wouldn't expect to get any truffles within 3 years. So a little bit of research would have shown that the dog search not bearing any fruit was what would be expected. However, they changed their tune and congratulating him on becoming the first in the UK to grow the Perigord. So other people had grown the summer/autumn truffle, but Prince Philip was the first to cultivate the Perigords at Sandringham. There was a sort of media embargo on it for 2 years or so, and in the period somebody else claimed the crown first, but in reality he actually was the first, and it is still there, I gather. I don't know how well it's doing or if they're selling the truffles, but it is still present there. So going back close to home, so opportunities for small woodland owners. A couple of case studies. I couldn't do my job without small woodland owners and some larger woodland owners as well. So there's sort of a few case studies for the involvement I have with some small woodland owners and the sorts of things that I get up to in their woods, which might be of interest to some of you. So in Dorset, first of all, the farm manager wandering through the woodland, actually found a few by eye. So he didn't use his dog to do this. He sort of just, wandering through, found them. Animals dig them up, animals eat them, but sometimes you might startle the animal, or the animal might just leave them laying on the ground surface. So I've found truffles without my dogs on occasion. So he found them, and he, Googled it and found me. This was a beach plantation, and said, did I want to buy them? I said, no, not really, but I'm interested in potentially working with you. So I went there with my dogs, and we found more. And it's the woodland is managed by a sort of sort of management company. So I actually have a permit. That means I'm fully compliant with the law. I have it in writing that I'm allowed to go in there if I get challenged by anybody. And so yeah, I get an annual permit to go in there. And it's all very lovely relationship. I text them, say, "Oh, right, is it okay if I pop along on Wednesday afternoon?" I go in there, I get truffles, I weigh them, I then, tell them I got so much. I keep a spreadsheet of it. I pay them a certain amount per kilo, and then at the end of the year, I backs them the money, and they give me a receipt for it. Um, Going there a little bit after the season, there's some self-seeded sycamore. I sort of shown that photo. A few bits of elder and other things in there, which I'm sort of trying to keep out. Sycamore can be quite put out a lot of seeds, so I keep those under control. That's that woodland in Dorset, doing a stunt double for appearing somewhere in the Cotswolds. Country Life was doing a feature on the Cotswolds, and a photographer came down to Dorset because I couldn't bother to go to the Cotswolds. And a very famous photographer who's photographed royal weddings and things like that. It took about 3 hours to get that photo. I was in pain by the end of all the posing. Right, so let's go from Dorset across to Somerset. There, a gentleman has 4 acres deciduous woodland. It's a mix. There's some birch in there, hornbeam, hazel oak, and it's on the edge of the Cotswold limestone in the Bath area. One of the services we offer is what we call rent a truffle hound. We can go and visit people's woodlands and search if they've got truffles. We can also go to truffle orchards as well. So he was invited us up there. We charge by the hour, charge of travel as well. And we found truffles there. The owner gets to keep the truffles, so we can sell them to us. Went quiet, and we got quite a lot of requests for private truffle hunts, sort of small groups. And so I suggested we went there, and we use a lovely room that they have in the farmhouse. They cook us lunch and afternoon tea, so he gets a good cut of the money out of it. And for use of the wood, so the woodland is earning him some money as well. And this was a very memorable one. The guy posed to his now wife in the woodland. She did not know what she was doing the whole day. He got her up at 5 o'clock and he says, "We've got to get in the car, we've got to go somewhere." And they turned up and she didn't know what she was doing. And I knew at some point he was going to get the ring out while he was digging out a truffle. And we got back at lunchtime and the host said, "Has he done it?" "No, not yet, not yet." And then he did propose in the afternoon. And I bought a hat for the wedding, but sadly it was in Australia, so I didn't get an invite. So a third case study, back down in Dorset. We do go further afield as well, just this is where the case studies fit. So a beech plantation on chalk. They're about 20 years old. It was some sort of grant scheme that enabled that on sort of quite a steep slope, but it was just sitting there, doing nothing. They weren't managing it. They weren't taking any wood from it. I used to drive past it. There's a beautiful bit of the Jurassic Coast somewhere near. That's what I'm telling you. I'm behind my back. No more information on that. I just drove past it and thought, that's got to. So one day I stopped, called at the house, said, "Do you tell me who owns that woodland?" And they pointed me to a farmhouse, and knocked on the door, told the lady what I was about. And she said, "Oh, well, if you give us half, certainly you can go in." An hour or two later, I turned up, which was, "What am I meant to do with all these? I don't want them all." And so I said I could buy them off you. And she thought, "Oh yeah, money's far better than having all these." So I used to pay her something a kilo for them. So we used it for truffle sales a number of years. lots of people are trying to train their dogs. As I said, we ran a workshop at the weekend. The proof of the pudding is to actually, um, people might try a look in a wood and not find a truffle, and they wonder, is it the dog is not up to the job, or there's not any truffles there? So we could sort of control the variables, go to a woodland that has truffles in it, and they could have an hour with their dog looking for truffles. They got the first two, I got the rest. But this lady, very delighted that a German Shepherd had found sort of half a dozen reasonable truffles, and she grinned like a Cheshire cat for a week. She'd bump into people 3 or 4 days later and say, "Has something good happened in your life?" She was sort of smiling so much. She was delighted. She put in a lot of work for that. I had to juggle sites for taking larger groups around, and so this is now a site we use for what we call truffle hunting experience days. So people in smaller groups, individuals, couples, families, book up a day, and they get a whole day of learning about truffles, truffle hunting, having lunch, more truffle hunting, having afternoon tea, including the freshest truffles they'll ever have in their life. So we use that. So the day after, or the sort of first weekday after one of those, I backed a generous sum to the woodland owner, and he doesn't have to do a great deal for it. He streams around the edge, and the woodland is there. He wouldn't access the truffles. He doesn't do anything with the woodland. So as somebody once told me, a wood that pays is a wood that stays. So I get in there once the truffle season over and do some management. We know wood is a good habitat, but not when my guests are watching my dog and tripping over it. So I do some sort of habitat piles of it. Some that are a bit precarious as well. If they're sort of, they're dead, but they're leaning up against another tree, we'll sort of take those down in a controlled manner and stack them. We get rid of this self-sown ash and sycamore, so it's not quite the same area, but that's sort of the thin thumb thickness poles of sort of self-seeded ash and sycamore, and that's post clearing, and tree guards. You had a talk, I think, about plastic tree guards, and it's a bugbear of mine. So I got a good number of sacks out of them, which are sitting in my garage and trying to find somebody to reuse them, but haven't done so yet. So that's all the case study. So opportunities for small woodland owners. Have you got truffles? So if you're in the chalk or limestone areas, then tick. If you're a bit nearer to me, and we do travel, Dorset, Somerset, Wiltshire, Hampshire. If you're in those areas, do kindly get in touch if you're potentially interested in a money-making venture. There's the email. You can find me. We can do what we call a desktop study. I worked in GIS, Geographical Information Systems, sort of maps on computers for quarter of a century. And so I still have a GIS, but with all manner of information, data sets that are pertinent to truffles, geologies and soil aspects and woodland types and things like that. So I could give you a remote view. So without actually visiting, do I think there's a chance, or do I think it's a waste of time? So yeah, we can take a look at that. If you're nearer to home, then I can bring a dog and we can wander around and see if we can find some truffles. And if you have, then there's the potential of doing something together to sort of bring some money into your woodland. So among things, we gather truffles for sale. So like I said, I'm going to turn up once every 3 or 4 weeks. And if you want to come around with me, great. If you want to let me get on with it, we just tell you the weight and backs you some money, and you can send me a receipt. Hunting experience days, we're looking, all our sites are running capacity on every 3 or 4 weeks. We're taking groups into them, so we're after more sites, particularly for sort of private small groups, ad hoc ones. So that's an opportunity. Among our private ones, this is the great British legend, Mary Berry, among the people I have met doing this game. So we took her and her family up to that site near Somerset. No cameras, just a jolly day out for them. We do the dog training, and we're missing a site to be able to do the woodland lessons, like where the grinning lady. Again, just very limited number of occasions. Just one day, perhaps every couple of months for half the year. So that is me done. So opportunities, great, get in touch. But if you want to eat truffles or buy books or think about planting some trees, we've got a really long FAQ about truffle trees. If you want to hire a dog to come and look, and I am your man. So right, that's me done. And can I remember how to get out of all this and hand back to Sarah? Right, are you there, Sarah?
I I think I am. I'm here, yeah.
Right,
Oh, James, that was absolutely jam-packed. Thank you so much. There's no
you're welcome.
truffle in that. I think Mary Berry, that's the bit that impressed me.
Yeah. Oh, amongst others, some I signed NDAs I couldn't mention possibly.
Ah, wow. So I'm excited to see that our woodland, I think it lies in the chalk sort of region. So that's
Oh,
quite, I'm on a recce mission. My husband wanted to know if there's a chance that we might have them. So that's quite exciting. Um, yeah, really, really interesting. So when you said you could rent a truffle hunt, how far across the country would you go?
I I used to do mad things like being in the Chilterns for 9 o'clock in the morning. But as I've got older and I can be a little bit more selective. So people that have come on my truffle dog training workshops and have run with it, and others that sort of have found me occasionally I advertise. I call them my sort of regional network. So if it's further than I want to travel, I can probably find somebody, within 100 miles or something like that. So, they might want to come to you, charge for being there and charge the mileage. But, it's not me going up to Yorkshire from Dorset at 45p a mile, costing you, 200 quid before I've even arrived or something like
Right.
that. So we can probably do the marrying up, they're dating for woodland owners and truffle hunters.
You got like a mycelial network across the country. That's quite nice.
Well done, very good.
Thank
So
you.
we've got some questions. So can you train a dog using truffle oil, or do you need the real thing?
We use truffle oil for the first, probably about 95% of our truffle dog training. It's cheaper, like a little bottle that lasts you, far, it'll go off in a year or two before you've used it all up, for a tenner or so. Whereas, bits of truffle will cost you more than that. So you do all your truffle training on truffle oil, and then when you get to the stage that somebody else could go and hide little plastic pot with a bit of truffle oil in a woodland, if you could bet £20 your dog is going to find it, then you get yourself some truffle, and you put it in the plastic pots. The dog doesn't think, oh, this is nice, yum yum. Your 20 or 30 pounds has gone down the dog's stomach, immediately. So yeah, swap to truffle when you're confident.
Okay, okay. Um, and then what chance do you think there would be in North Norfolk? We have the chalky ground, but we don't figure on your map. Richie would like to know that.
There are truffle finds from Norfolk. I used to know a lady that was fairly mid Norfolk and got them in a garden and on the hedges, not very far away. A lot of East Anglia has got boulder clay over the top, but there are some wild truffle records from Norfolk. It's not my patch, but I've that map that had the published truffle records, my GISE mapping background, I've got lots of other layers which I don't share with Joe Public, including all the garden finds and country estates that used to have truffles. And so, I, I, there is definitely finds from Norfolk, but there are truffle orchards in Norfolk as well.
Hmm. So Prince Philip wasn't the first. That's yeah. So and then the same question about the Chilterns.
Yeah, there are truffles in the Chilterns. I've been to the Chilterns on various estates there. There is a complexity. It's not just all chalk. Yes, it is, but there's something else that happens at the surface, what we call clay with flints. And quite a lot of the plateaus, the sort of tops of the hills, do have this clay with flints, which makes it acidic and free. And It's clayey, so it doesn't drain as well. So they're less common on that. So yeah, they are in the Chilterns. They're known from sort of the beech woodlands. A lot of beech woodlands, sort of furniture making originally around places like High Wycombe and so on. So there are truffles in the Chilterns.
Um, Ben asks a question. He says, "Great, James, thank you. Unlikely that he'll have truffles in the mid-Norfolk location, but you never know. What depth or distance from a tree would you expect to find truffles?"
Width-wise, they could be anywhere under the canopy. So the truffle will, the sort of the mycelium will grow out concentrically, just like the fairy ring on the grass. And so anywhere under the drip line, the truffles could occur. Depth, it varies enormously with a lot of variables. Some places they poke out of the ground surface and they can be occasionally spotted by eye. Somebody I know harvests his exclusively by hand without a dog. I've never done it by eye. I've seen the odd one, but very rare. Some places, if they're big trees, you might have, 4 inches of humus leaf litter before you get to the proper soil, and they're probably in the proper soil or on the interface between the two. Many woods, are that exposed, or the leaf litter blows out, so you haven't got all that leaf litter on top. So it varies quite a lot. I don't want to damage the mycelium, so is dig the smallest amount that I can. So it's a little hand hoe that I use. I have known people use a cake fork, or a normal garden trowel.
Is that Mary
And
Berry who used the cake fork?
yeah, of course, no, it wasn't actually, but yeah, no, Mary Berry has used my truffle digging tool. Yes, I didn't get to sign it, but yeah, it's we want to be sustainable. We don't want to damage the mycelium, and we can keep some of the woods I've been going to for 10 years. I'm still getting truffles, but so depth. Sorry, Ben, no real answer. I'll stop after about 6 inches unless I can smell it. So a strange behaviour of the truffle hunter. His dog says it's there. You then sniff the ground, and they're really aromatic at the moment. The wood I was in on Tuesday, quite often, I could have put a leaf, a small leaf, I could put a coin on top of where the truffle was on the ground, because I could, nose down, me smelling the ground. In that YouTube video, a lot of the people sort of make really weird comments about me sniffing the ground.
The benefit of having a James is, of course, he won't bite any of your fingers off as well, so that's good. Laura says she would. Oh, hang on. Laura said two things. I've scrolled away. She said she would be very interested and wanted to look into truffles and stop, as she didn't know where to find trained dogs or pigs. So, of course, your website is English. Is it the English Truffle Company dot?
It's englishtruffles.co.uk.
Okay, okay. And you're quite easy to find if you just type in English truffles. All of your social media
Yeah,
pops up.
yeah. Or just
Um,
truffles.
okay, we've got just 1 minute, so I'll round up the last question. What's the minimum acreage to consider a collaboration? We have pause mixed broadleaves.
It would depend on where it is. Some of the woodlands I go to, I can't look at a bit of land and say how big it is in hectares or acres, really. I should be able to. But some of them are perhaps 100 meters long and 20 wide, something like that. And, that keep me happily occupied for an hour and a half. And, I've come out with a kilo from that. So, I'm not going to drive hundreds of miles for a postage stamp, but, they don't need to be, vast woodlands going on for miles. Small ones can, be really, really good.
I think you should, do you do YouTube videos of when you go on truffle hunts, James? Because like opal hunters and outback hunters, I reckon you could have that kind
Yeah, I am an addict of those programs on Dave. Is it Aussie Gold Hunters and Oak
Yeah, we
Hunters? Yeah,
like
yeah,
that as
I love
well,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. Somebody has filmed me. Generally, if you're watching the dog closely and thinking about getting it on the ground, I find using a phone at the same time impossible. Not falling over the twig, the stumps and things like that. But there is on the website, there's a few videos. Perhaps on the truffle hunting page, somebody else did a little Instagram reel, or whatever the jargon is. But there's lots of pictures of people digging truffles. There, on my website, there are thousands of photos of truffles and people digging truffles and things. So head there. But yeah, I need a cameraman,
That's good.
woman,
Well, I tell you
camera
what.
person. There you go.
I can edit that out, don't worry. So that brings us to the end of our talk. James, thank you so much. I think we're all hopeful that We've got truffles in our woodlands. Please look at James's website. We will put the details in our November newsletter as well, because, like you say, make rather fine Christmas presents for the small woodland owners in your lives. If you have any other questions, please just message me and I will pass them on to James. And I will upload the YouTube video tonight and I'll send it your way, James, so you can use it as you like as well. Thank you for
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thanks for taking the time to make such a wonderful presentation, and I think we've all really enjoyed it.
Great, thank you to those put thanks comments on there. Yeah, if you get in touch, I am traveling tomorrow, working all weekend, so there's not going to be an instant reply. If I'm doing days out in the field, I just try to ignore email for a bit and watch the telly and things a little bit. Yeah, great. Thanks all very much. Thank you for joining in.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the rest of you for joining. And please keep your eye out for our Leicestershire truffle, well, not a truffle hunt, a fungal foray that we have, and we've got other ones coming up in December. But just check our socials as always. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye all. Thanks, Sarah.
Cheerio.